Hello everyone. In this video, we are going to look at a previous exam paper and we're going to focus on the chapter of statistics. So this paper that we have here is for the grade 10s. Without any waste of time, let's just get right to it. So the first question that we have, it says 19 girls were required to complete a puzzle as quickly as possible. Their times in seconds were recorded and are shown in the table below. So already we know that we have 19 girls and this data will represent the time it took each girl to complete the puzzle. So the first step, it will be for us to arrange this data in order. But if we look at this data, the data is already arranged in order. So this means that we can just start to answer the questions. So the first question that we have, it says identify the median time taken by the girls to complete the puzzle. So if we talk about the median of the data, it is represented by the middle data from all the data set. So for us to get the median, that means we're going to cancel the first value as well as the last value. And we're going to do that to the second value as well as the second last. And we're going to do that up until we get to the middle of the data. So we will end up having the middle data to be 19. So this means that the median of the data is 19. So the second question will say that determine the lower and the upper quartile of the data. So if you want to determine the lower quartile of the data, we are going to look at the data that comes before the median. And then if you want to identify the upper quartile of the data, we're going to look at the data that comes after the median. So on the value that comes before the median, we're going to look at what? At the value that is at the middle. So that value will determine the lower quartile. So we are going to do the same thing to say now the first value will cancel with the last, the second with the second last, and then we're going to do that up until we get to the middle value. So the middle value of the data before the median, it is going to be 17. Therefore, the lower quartile is 17. So we're going to do the same thing to get the upper quartile. We're going to say the first, last, second first, and then second last. And then we're going to do that up until we get to the middle of the date. So we can see that the upper quartile is going to be 22. So that is how you identify the upper and the lower quartile. So 1.3 says draw a box and whisker diagram to represent the data. So if you want to draw a box and whisker diagram, you need what we call the 5 summary number. So the 5 summary number are given as the minimum value, the lower quartile, the middle quartile, the upper quartile, and the maximum value. So we already have these 3 quartiles because the middle quartile is represented by the median. So the median of the data is the same thing as the middle quartile, which is Q2. So the minimum value on our data, it is going to be 14 and the maximum will be 29. So we have the minimum value of 14, the maximum value of 29. So the lower quartile was 17, the median, which is the middle quartile, was 19, and the upper quartile is 22. So this is the 5 summary data that we have so that we can plot the box and whisker diagram. So now when we plot the box and whisker diagram, we must draw our number line to say that our number line is going to start at the value that will include the minimum value So the minimum value is 14. So this means we can start here at 10. And then the maximum value that we have is 29. So therefore, we can end at 30. So now it will be up to you how you will divide the data in between. For example, here I can move with the distances of 5. So we're going to have 15 here. Then we're going to have 20. And then we have 25 and 30. So now we will be able to represent our data. We will say that the value of the minimum value is 14. So 14 just comes before 15. So you're going to have the point of 14 here. You can just indicate to say the minimum value equals to 14 because sometimes your scale is not accurate. But now if you show what is the minimum value, the teacher will give that correct. So if we look at Q1, Q1 is going to be 17. So 17 just comes after 15. So we're going to say this is Q1, which is having 17. And then the Q2 is 19. 19 comes before 20. So we have Q2, which is at 19. And then lastly, Q3 just comes after 20, which is 22. So this will be our Q3, which is at what? At 22. So the maximum value will be before 30, which is 29. And then we can now finish our box and whisker diagram. So that is how we're going to draw the box and whisker diagram. The next question that comes is 1.4. So 1.4, they say that the 5 summary data of the time in seconds taken by 19 boys to complete the same puzzle is 5, 19, 23, 26, and 30. So we already have the 5 summary data. And remember, the 5 summary data represents the minimum data, the lower quartile, middle quartile, upper quartile, and the maximum value. So we have the minimum as 15, lower quartile 19, middle quartile 23, and upper quartile 26, and the maximum is 30. So this is the 5 summary data that is given to us. So the question that follows, it says calculate the interquartile range of the time taken by boys. So the interquartile range, it is given with the equation the upper quartile minus the lower quartile. So already on our 5 summary number, we have the upper quartile and the lower quartile. So we're just going to say 26 minus 19. So the interquartile range of the data will be 26 minus 19, which will give us 7. So that is the interquartile range. So the next question that comes, it says that 1.4.2, if only one boy took 19 seconds to complete the puzzle, what percentage of boys took at least 19 seconds to complete the puzzle? So now, if we say at least simply means the values that are equal to 19 seconds or more than 19 seconds. That is at least. So we're going to say now, what is the percentage of the data that is 19 seconds or more than 19 seconds? So if we look at our 5 summary number, the 19 seconds here, it represents the lower quartile. And then remember, the lower quartile of the data is 25% of the data. So this will mean that the data that is left, which is above 19 seconds, is going to be 75% of the data. So we will therefore say 75% of the data took at least more than 19 seconds to complete the puzzle. So because at least means more than, you include and more. So if we move on to the next question, which is 1.5. 1.5 says that which group of girls or boys did a large number of learners complete the puzzle in less than 23 seconds. So we're going to look at a data whereby we have more values that are less than 23 seconds. So if we look at our data here, so at the Q2 here, which is the middle quartile, we have 23 seconds. So this means that 50% of the students, or the boys in this case, they actually have the time that is less than 23 seconds. And then 50% has more than that. So this will mean that the one that are less than 23 at the boys is going to be 50%. But if we go back and look at the data of the girls, so remember the 5 summary number of the girls is this one. So we'll see that at Q3, we have 23. We actually have 22. So this will mean that Q3 represents 75%. So this will mean the girls that are more than or that are equal to 75% of the data have less than 22 seconds. So this will mean that more girls will have the values of less than 23 seconds more than the boys. So to answer this question, we are going to say the girls have more values that are less than 23 seconds. So more girls have the time less than 23 seconds. And then because, for example, is if you want to give the reason for that, we can say now 75% of the girls are less than 22 seconds. But now only 50% of the boys have less than 23. So that is how you would answer question 1.5. So if I can read the question again so that you understand, it says that in which group, the girls or the boys, did a larger number of learners complete the puzzle in less than 23 seconds? So we see that in the data of the girls, we have more than 75% of the data that is less than 23 seconds. But in the boys, we have less than 50% of the data that is less than 23 seconds. So that means now more of the girls will be covering less than 23 seconds. So now, if we move on to the next question, which is question number 2 now, we have a grouped data. So they say that the table below shows the information about the number of hours 120 learners spent on their cell phones. So already we are given the total number of the learners. So this will mean now our total frequency, it is going to be 120. You can just add all your frequencies to double check if ever that is true. So you're going to say 10 plus 15 plus 30 plus 35 plus 25 plus 5, and then we get 120. So this means now the total frequency is 120. It is already given to us on the data. So the first question says identify the modal class. So remember the modal class, it is going to be the class that is having the highest frequency. So if we look at our frequencies here, the higher frequency is here at 35. So this will mean the modal class will be this class here, whereby the value of hours are in between 6 and 8. So that will be the modal class. So the last question, which is 2.2, it says estimate the mean number of hours that these learners spent on their cell phone in the last week. So if you want to estimate the mean from the what? From a grouped data, we are going to say that the mean of the grouped data is given by the sum of the product of the midpoint and the frequency of the data divided by the total frequency. So this will mean that we need to get all the midpoints of our data. So if we look at these intervals here, to get the midpoint, we must get the average of each interval. For example, the midpoint here on what? On the first interval is going to be the value that is in between 0 and 2. So between 0 and 2, the middle value will be 1. So let me just draw a table here so that we represent the midpoint. So you're going to say that the middle value in between this first interval, 0 and 1, is going to be 1. And then in between 2 and 3, in between 2 and 4, we have 3. Between 4 and 6, we have 5. Between 6 and 8, we have 7. And we have 8 and 9. 8 and 10, we're going to have 9. And then 10 and 12, we're going to have 11. So this will be the midpoint that we have. But now to get what? To get this thing here, which is the product of the midpoint and the frequency, this will mean we must multiply the frequency with the midpoint. So if I can just draw the table of what? Of the product of the midpoint and frequency on this side, we are going to see that we're going to say 10 multiplied by 1, 15 multiplied by 3, and multiply everything like that. So you're going to have 10 multiplied by 1, 15 multiplied by 3, which is the midpoint, 30 multiplied by 5, and then 35 multiplied by 7, 25 multiplied by 9, and last we have 5 multiplied by 11. So if we put all this data into the calculator, we're going to say 10 multiplied by 1 is going to be 10, and then 15 multiplied by 3 is going to give us 45, and then 30 multiplied by 5 is going to give us 150. 35 multiplied by 7 is going to give us 245. 25 multiplied by 9 is going to give us 225. And then 5 multiplied by 11 is going to give us 55. So now we need to get the sum of this product of the midpoint and frequency. So we have to add everything all together. So the sum of this will give us 10 plus 45 plus 150 plus 245 plus 225 plus 55. So the sum will be 730. So already we have the total frequency, which is the total number of the learners, or you can get the total frequency by just adding all the frequencies. So we have it as 120. So we will therefore say the estimated mean of the data will be this sum of the product of midpoint and frequency, which is 730, divided by the total number of the learners, which is the total frequency, that is 120. So if we put that into the calculator, we find that the estimated mean of the data is 6.08. So that is how you would answer that problem. That is all we have in this video. Thank you very much.